Hello and welcome to our Business Spotlight interview series. I'm your host, Mackenzie Muse, and today I'm joined by Peter Hickey, who is the founder of Sums Capital. Peter, thank you so much for joining us. Would you like to kick us off with a brief background as to who you are and what you do?
Sure. Nice to meet you, and thanks for having me today. Peter Hickey. I am a co-founder and investor in a number of different businesses over the last 8 years, predominantly in the life sciences sector. I'm a co-founder of a company called Adaptive Medical Technologies, another company called Illumix Corporation, and IR Scientific is another one. I've worked with a number of different companies in life sciences now. I'm a member of the Life Sciences Nova Scotia board, happily serving that organization and helping life sciences companies in the Atlantic region, particularly in Nova Scotia. The latest venture that I've been involved in is a company called Sums Capital. Our focus with Sums is around investor relations. It's about building and galvanizing a network of investors, folks that want to invest in early stage companies or that have a portfolio of investments in early stage companies. And we help them manage that portfolio in a sense of providing them with a solution that allows them to essentially gather publicly traded like information on privately held companies. So something that we're really excited about that we have some announcements coming up in the not too distant future. But that is largely what I fill my day with is a number of companies and my time on the board with Life Sciences Nova Scotia, now Sums as well. So
Very cool. That's very interesting. And with all those companies, what would you attribute your growth to?
So with those particular companies, the ones, the ones that I kind of spend the most time with, my growth in terms of, do you mean growth as a business or growth as an individual?
Growth within your businesses.
Sure. So growth, the companies that are moving forward, growing and so forth, it really always, it sounds cliche, but it really is about having the right people. We have in the last number of years really put a focus on making sure that the experience that we need for organizations, that we go out and actively recruit that experience. I think a lot of the entrepreneurs that are in Atlantic Canada, don't necessarily go out and recruit, top global type talent. But, we have advisors in these companies that are second to none, across the globe, world-renowned people in these particular positions that are providing advice. So we always, are open to, to going outside, knocking on doors, frankly, cold calling, bringing in expertise where needed. And really that's been the focus. The growth has largely come from a combination of kind of, I think, the right advice, but also being, milestone driven, measuring everything and saying, this is what our goal is, good communications with the team on how we get there. And then it's really about execution afterwards. So.
That's amazing. I've been finding that's such a common trend with entrepreneurs saying what their growth's attributed to is their people. And
Yeah, it's nothing, there's no, magic sauce to us. Growing companies like Illumix Corporation, for example, last year grew by over 250%. The reason why that company grew is because of the alignment of the people, within it, that they all understood the end goal. When they were presented with an obstacle, they went around it or through it in some cases. But you had everybody from, that company has just over 40 employees now, spread across a couple of different provinces, does about 85% of our business is actually US based. But you have this team that's all aligned, that, great communication, but just find it out, and that's a big part of all of it, is that it's not, I think, kind of the next generation and so forth. And I have sons that are 18 and 16, and this sort of generation that folks, see as business, kind of growing and building a following really quickly and getting tons of money in and so forth. Those are sort of, that kind of ruins it for all the other entrepreneurs, frankly, because, they seem to forget that there's a lot of work, a lot of grinding it out, hitting those milestones. It's not, in many cases, it's not chess, it's checkers. It's moving one space at a time, keep moving forward, capitalize on opportunities when they come. But just, essentially, keep working hard, and the good opportunities come along.
Exactly. Thank you. That's a great answer. So between your family and all the businesses that you've developed, how do you find time for your personal life with the demands of running businesses?
Uh, that's, throughout my career, and I'm just about to turn 50 this year, every entrepreneur that I've seen, I've rarely met a successful entrepreneur who says that their family life hasn't suffered in one manner or another. And mine, I wouldn't say suffers, but my wife and I have worked very hard to make it work. She married somebody who enjoys work. She's kind of understood that from day one. I haven't missed, really any birthday parties or, very many sporting events and so forth. But, when we're away on vacation, I take calls, when we are, if we're traveling, if we're doing something, a lot of the time, it's been noted that my mind might be somewhere else. So, work-life balance, I think, is really nice. I frankly am a bad person to ask about it because, to be completely honest, it's not something I've achieved. I have an extremely understanding wife, great kids. Whenever I'm not working, I'm focused on them. But yeah, I work a lot. So it is, work-life balance, I find, is a nice to have sometimes. So.
Exactly. Well, from what you've described, you seem like you're doing a pretty good job with what you can.
Ask me, on any given day, it might be a different answer. So,
That's very fair. And what would you say are some of the most common misconceptions about running a business, and how do you address them?
Um, Most common, for me, it's that, it's sort of like business travel. I think everybody who, I've traveled a lot through my career, a lot. I've lived out of suitcase for significant periods of time and so forth. I think folks forget, or don't necessarily realize, just, that it is work. Whenever, if I'm traveling somewhere, and it sounds, all quite fancy and so forth, I've seen, the boardrooms in airports, in some of the world's greatest cities, and so forth. But, getting to experience those, I think those are some of the misconceptions, is that, and it comes into that work-life balance, again, so I think in those particular cases, I think that the misconceptions is, in a lot of ways, I would say would be one, I find the people I've looked up to in my career understood understood the grind, and got to know it, got to like the grind on the, of the day-to-day business. I think sometimes we think of business too much as, it's supposed to be really complicated, and the goal in business is to break big complex problems down into more simple, kind of bite-sized chunks. So if you can take a big problem, and simplify it, make it something that, frankly, your team could get their arms around and so forth, you have a lot better chance of success. And the other thing I find, and I spend a great deal of my time, with my investors, and I have a really tremendous group of investors that have supported me and so forth. One of the things that I tell people whenever they're pitching, particularly in life sciences and science-based businesses, you have to actually understand that it's a story. People generally assume, that the technology works. And yes, there's a certain level of due diligence that needs to be done, before they invest. But, it's understanding, what is the problem that we're solving? Is it a problem that really needs to be solved? The other misconception sometimes that that early stage businesses will say would be, which is always funny when they say it, is they say we don't have any competitors, and that just isn't true. It doesn't matter what it is, you're competing with somebody for those dollars right now. So whether it's a new revolutionary business, 90% of the time, 99% of the time, there's always something that's established that's a status quo, that somehow that need is being met, maybe not successfully, and therein lies the opportunity. But one of the rookie mistakes I find is that when companies go out and they say, hey, we have no competitors, this is great. To me, that always indicates that they haven't talked to enough people, enough investors, enough customers, and so forth to really understand what the true nature of the problem is. So.
Perfect. I completely agree with that. So tying back to attributing your growth to the people in your company, what are the qualities that you look for in employees,
Mhm.
and how do you foster a positive and productive work environment?
So the productive and the productive environment, for me, it always comes back to communication, and that is, any leader in a business, the idea, the idea that there's one leader in the business and he or she is, making all the decisions and so forth. To me, those are the worst businesses. That's somebody saying I know best in multiple areas. So when we look at teams, and whether it's something that we're investing in or something that we're building and so forth, it really is about team players. And team players, best team players are always good communicators in business. So there needs to be a lot of humility. I was involved in a business that dealt with medical physics. That then, the next company that I was involved in is a bioglass, so a ton of very heavy chemistry. And the next business was proteomics business, so extremely complex businesses. And at no point did I ever pretend, to be an expert, in any of them. And I think that sometimes, young leaders look at say, okay, I have the big title, so I'm supposed to know all this stuff, and they pretend. And for the experienced people that are out there, it's pretty blatant, that this person's in over their head, and doesn't want to admit it. And so, you do yourself a disservice, frankly, whenever you are, whenever you pretend to know something that you don't. It comes out really quickly to the people who have actually been around and have some of that experience. So when you look at team, one, it's, is the team coachable? Do they buy in? Do they have an opinion? Are they good communicators? The thing that we always look for is, those people who one can admit they're wrong and own up to it and say, this is my fault. I want to make this, I want to fix this. Everybody makes mistakes. You learn so much more from your mistakes, than success. So yeah, in a team that we're looking, as we're looking to build and add, it really comes down to, how good a communicator are they? Obviously the areas of expertise and so forth, when you're dealing with, particularly technologies and so forth, you're looking for people with some very sophisticated skill sets. So in many cases, PhDs, doctors, masters, deep science background defined, but it doesn't forego the need to actually make sure that that person's a team player. So, how are they going to fit into the culture? Because otherwise, the last thing you want is a toxic environment, where one particular person feels he or she is indispensable and the rest of the people can be replaced. So, and that really starts at the top. I've met, one CEO in particular once told me that, particular case, this individual told me that he or she, they said, I've never failed, and I said, please, don't ever say that to an investor, right? Because all that tells them is that you've never done anything, right? I mean, of course you've failed, right? We all fail, plenty of times throughout our career. So this idea that the CEO has to be kind of that bang your chest and, I'm the man kind of thing, like, to me, those are just the worst kind, and I've met lots of them. I've been fortunate to work with some really great people, work with some real, jackasses as well, frankly, that, throughout my career, and you learn something from everybody. So yeah, so team is, if I had to pick a, a trait, a number of traits. It'd always be, yes, you want them to be exceptionally smart, really good communicator, decent human beings, would probably be the third, and some humility would be the fourth, that they understand that they don't know everything. So.
Perfect. Thank you for that. So building on your point of learning something from everyone,
Mhm.
what have been your biggest learnings as an employer? Sorry, since you began in business.
Sure. No, so yeah, sort of same thing. Biggest learnings. One, patience, is probably the biggest one. I am, I think by DNA makeup, I'm not a particularly patient person. And that earlier in my career, I think that probably limited me. I wanted, quick turnaround on things, all the time. As my wife would particularly, would echo to me probably, earlier on in my career. That is, she would say, more or less like, look, you wouldn't want everybody to be like you. Could you imagine if if the whole company was full of people like you? That'd be, a disaster. And she's right. She said it much nicer than that, but that's the gist of it. Um, but patience is certainly something that I've had to learn and continue to need to frankly practice. Um, that's the big thing. Good things do take time. You're never going to change somebody's mind with an email, or kind of one conversation. If somebody's dug in, it takes time. You need to be patient. You need to kind of understand their point of view, where they're coming from. And in many cases, sometimes that leads to essentially going their route, right? You need to be open, to actually saying, you know what, all I want here is the best answer for this company, right? So whether it's this person's idea or my idea, when we decide, we all have to get behind it, and that's a big learning on that side, is that when you have a team that says, you know what, it wasn't my first idea, it wasn't something I actually thought would work, but once we decided, everybody goes all in and makes it work, and is realistic about things when it's not working, as opposed to sitting on the sidelines and say, I didn't get my idea picked, so I'm going to sit in the sidelines, wait till it fails, and then I'll say I told you so. That never works. So that's probably the biggest learnings on that side is, you need the people around you. Nobody can do it all. And frankly, you need to be patient, and good things do take time to build out and realize. So.
Exactly. That's a great answer. So last question of the day.
Sure.
If you were to start from square one in your business, is there anything that you would have done differently? And also just any take home points for our viewers watching?
Um, that's, it's always a hard question. It's sort of I think the things that you would have done differently, I mean, the first tendency is to go back and actually think about, where have my failures been? But, the position that I'm, frankly, sort of where I think my career has sort of evolved to and where I am now, without the mistakes that I made, and I've made tons of mistakes, you really wouldn't have learned from it. We had a company we had a company years ago that we ended up basically, selling for pennies, and so it wasn't particularly successful, but it was really close a couple of times, and I remember at the time kind of thinking, this is the worst ever. But whenever it sort of, went down the tubes and so forth. If we had been successful at that, then we probably would have thought that that was the formula to be successful. We probably would have tried to repeat it a number of times, and it actually gave us the understanding that, hey, in any business, it's really important to have traction, right? Without sales traction, without revenue and so forth, that's an area that all investors will look at. That's the measuring stick. We had an amazing technology, but frankly, other companies, even in due diligence, they were trying to basically say, could we build this ourselves? If we threw enough money, enough engineers at it, could we build this technology or a form of this technology? And that was the area. So, in terms of, what would I do differently? I probably would have bought, looking back, I probably would have bought a lot of Bitcoin very early on. But aside from that, that's, I don't really, I'm not big kind of saying, wow, I wish I could have changed that. I do a pretty good job of reflecting on mistakes and saying, how do I learn from that? Yeah. But yeah, that's a tough one. Like I said, hindsight's always 2020. It doesn't, make a lot of sense to say, oh gosh, what could I have changed? I've been very fortunate. I've had very good relationships with, for the most part, with business partners and with investors, staff, friends, and so forth. So I've always been a particularly loyal person, and not been willing to, in some cases, I've probably kept folks on maybe longer than I should, but I think there is some value in that too. So yeah, so I would say there's probably not much that I would say I would do differently. So yeah, other than, like I said, buy a ton of Bitcoin when it was pennies, so.
Very fair. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Peter. It was a great interview, and I loved getting to know you and your entrepreneurial journey. For everyone watching, we look forward to seeing you in our next episode.
Awesome. Thanks so much.